You already know what it is. It's your boy Lightwalker X here, back with another video. And today I just kind of wanted to set something straight regarding the ranking of my big three order. Now, if you've been a subscriber to my channel for the last few months, I've pretty much made it no secret what my big three order is. But today I kind of just wanted to set it straight on where I rank the big three and why. And the best way to do that, at least to me, is to kind of go through each of their catalogs album wise. I think we'll also touch on some singles too, but just kind of go over each catalog for each rapper and go through each project and era and kind of explain my perspective on why I rank them the way I do. The big three has been running hip hop for the last decade plus, and it is a sight to see because we still don't have another big three or another set of rappers coming from this new generation to run the 2020s. It looks like the people from the blog era are very much still on top, which is very good for them, right? It says something about their music and longevity, but at the same time, we don't have any new stars. So we are still appreciating the music that these guys are putting out. And you can say what you want about these guys, but we know for a fact that these three have carried the genre on their backs over the last 15 years. So my big three ranking, we already know the big three consists of Kendrick, Drake, and J Cole. But my big three ranking as a Canadian hip hop fan, because I like to emphasize that a lot, is very unique. Now, back in the early 2010s, I was listening to Drake. Drake did start popping and getting a lot of buzz in Canada around 2008-ish, right? So Far Gone and stuff like that. He had that. But around those times, he was starting to finally get some buzz within the city, within the country. And then obviously he would go to the United States and work with Lil Wayne and stuff like that. So this era of listening to Drake around the early 2010s was very much a thing for, Canadians and myself, right? Drake was everywhere, and I was definitely very much listening to Drake at that time. But for me personally, at that time, I was still listening to a lot of Kanye West because My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy had just come out in 2010. One of my favorite hip hop albums, if not favorite hip hop album of all time, tied with probably To Pimp a Butterfly. But My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy had just come out. Lil Wayne was working on the Carter 4. Carter 3 had just dropped a couple years ago. And then Jay-Z. Jay-Z was still my guy. I grew up listening to Jay-Z a lot. So I was listening to those three heavy going into 2010, 2011, around that time. But Drake was still there, right? But at that point in time, I think I could say that Kanye was probably my favorite rapper because it was just so much good music, no pun intended, at that time. But yeah, in terms of my perspective of a Canadian hip hop fan, I was definitely listening to Yeezy, Weezy, Jigga. I was listening to those guys, but Drake was obviously right there. And that's why my big three ranking was I would say is very unique, because I find a lot of Canadians who started listening to hip hop around my age group, you could say that a lot of them, probably their first major introduction to hip hop was Drake, right? And how he was rapping earlier on because the passion was there. So there were a lot of people gravitating to his music, whether he was singing, whether he was doing a little rapping. People were vibing with Drake very much going into the early 2010s, especially obviously in Canada because he's from here. So that's why I personally would rank Drake and have always ranked Drake number three in my big three order. Not because of how he carried himself in the beef or how he's been carrying himself since and stuff like that. Like, Drake was always my number three. And when I say this to people, they look at me like I'm speaking blasphemy because I'm Canadian. I guess I'm supposed to have Drake at number one. But like I said earlier, in the early 2010s, Drake was still one of my favorites, but I had Lil Wayne, Kanye, and Jay-Z obviously above him. I was listening to those guys so much right at that time. I got my first iPod, I think was like 2009, 2010. So I was just pure Jay-Z, Kanye West, Lil Wayne, but Drake was very much still there. But because I listened to those guys so much, I think that's why Drake wasn't like my undisputed number one at that point in time. He was very close, but those guys definitely had it before him, in my opinion, right? So around 2010, I'm listening to Drake and I get my first CD, which is Thank Me Later. I love Thank Me Later. This album is phenomenal. Now, all the way from Fireworks, right? We had Karaoke, Over. Come on. Over is like one of Drake's biggest songs. And definitely they played that song. They play a lot of Drake songs on radio nonstop in Canada, but that was the one they were ringing constantly. And everybody was singing this. I was in, I think, the 6th grade or 7th grade when this song came out. Everybody was singing this, right? Show Me a Good Time, Up All Night, Fancy. Come on, Fancy is a classic song. These are records that I will never let anyone talk trash about because When I tell people that this era of Drake was my favorite, I mean that. Anything that I have to say to detract from Drake going forward, people don't understand that I was very much a fan going into the 2010s, early 2010s, because of the music he was putting out. And these songs, just even listening to them or listing them here, just bringing back memories of good times that I had with his earlier music. So Thank Me Later was definitely one of my favorite Drake projects. I know some people don't really like it. He was really showing himself on this album. You know, he had Light Up with Jay-Z. That's a classic song right there, right? Lil Wayne tracks, right? Find Your Love. Like, come on, Thank Me Now. Like, these songs definitely hit for me. And that's why I had Thank Me Later as one of my first hip hop CDs, because it was just a moment, right? And then obviously after that, he would follow up with, I would say, probably my favorite Drake album and his magnum opus, Take Care. From track 1 all the way to the end, I was bumping the hell out of this album nonstop. I loved it. It had Kendrick Lamar on it, which we'll get to later. It had Rihanna on the album, Nicki Minaj, like The Weeknd on Crew Love. Like, Take Care was a moment, because it finally felt like this was where people around the world were going to start taking us a little bit more seriously, because we had an artist that was putting out such a good body of work. And you couldn't escape this album. This album was everywhere. They still play it to this day. And it's, to me, arguably next with Nothing Was the Same, Drake's best album and my favorite from him, because I remember playing Take Care. It was probably one of my most played albums that year, right? And from start to finish, Over My Dead Body, classic. Shot For Me, classic. Headlines, classic. Crew Love with The Weeknd. That's the first time I ever heard The Weeknd outside of a song I heard on House of Balloons, but that was a classic. And for Canadians, we were like, oh my gosh, we got another guy coming up. Like, it was an amazing time, right? Take Care featuring Rihanna, that's a sweet song. Marvin's Room, everybody knows Marvin's Room. Buried Alive interlude, Kendrick Lamar, come on. That was, when I first heard that, that was insane, right? He's just putting this rappity rap guy. At the time, I only heard maybe like 2 Kendrick songs, but he's putting this rappity rap guy on this song, and he gave him the whole song. Like, that was amazing. You know what I mean? So Take Care, We'll Be Fine with Birdman, Make Me Proud, Nicki Minaj, like Lord Knows with Rick Ross. I think that's a Just Blaze beat. Wicked song. Like, all around, Take Care was definitely, I think, Drake at his best outside of Nothing Was the Same. Just sonically, album wise, sonic wise, the project as a whole, it just hit for me. And I was only maybe, I think, 13 or 14 when this album came out. I know people don't really rank it that high in terms of his other projects. They think Nothing Was the Same was better. Or some people will even say that he doesn't have any good albums. But I'm not going to come out here and cape. I'm going to tell you, you know, at this time when I was young, this is what I was playing. And this album definitely was something that went platinum in my house, because I was playing the hell out of this album. And this is where it felt like, yeah, Drake, you got something special. You're going to go on this tour. Whatever you drop next, you got it, right? So going into 2013, Drake would drop Nothing Was the Same. And by 2013 now, I'm going into high school. When you listen to music, it comes down to a lot of what your intake is, what you like, what you don't like, what you wish to learn. Maybe you choose not to wish to learn, right? And I was the guy that was always very curious. I always like researching. I always like learning new things. I like knowledge. I like certain specific niches of topics. So like for me, at this point in time, I remember high school, it was a lot of curiosity. It was a lot of me wanting to open my mind and just find new knowledge to better myself, right? And I'm very proud that I was able to have a mentality like that very early on. But unfortunately, when it came to listening to music, I started to become very picky going into high school of what I was listening to. And that's where I think, me personally, where Drake's sound just had a sudden shift. Now, mind you, we went from 2011 to 12, where I'm playing Drake nonstop, to 2013, where I'm playing Drake, right? Nothing Was the Same drops. I love the project, wicked project, but just something doesn't feel the same. And I don't know what it was. And I feel like people have said similar things around the time when Drake's music kind of started to feel a little weird to them. But I think it warrants a bigger conversation, because it comes down, like I said, to what you're going through, what your perspective is on things. And at the same time, it's a reflection of what Drake was going through and his perspective and what music he wanted to put out sonically at the time. And the two kind of matched, right? For a lot of people going forward from these years, this is when his music started to decline a little bit sonically. For me, I still think Nothing Was the Same is just as good as album as Take Care. But it just, for me, there was just something slightly not there. right? Tuscan Leather, one of his greatest opening songs that he's ever done, right? We have Started From the Bottom. That's obviously a classic. We know that song. Everybody knows that song. Wu-Tang Forever, another one, right? We got Own It, Worst Behavior. Everybody knows that. From Time, Janae Echo, come on. We were all singing that. Hold On, We're Going Home. That became a ballad. That was everywhere. Everybody was singing that on the radio, right? The Language. That's what started the beef, or technically was continuing the beef, we should say, right? That's another moment in hip hop right there, right? And Pound Cake with Jay-Z, one of my, if not probably my favorite song on this album, right? Whenever Jay-Z and Drake come together to make songs, you can say what you want, but they know what they're doing, right? And it's ironic that we're in the place that we're in right now with the two of them in a relationship, because when they make music, they make magic. I can't dispute that, right? So just for me, at this point in time, I think I was 15 years old, something just started to change. I did love this album. I did play it a lot, but not as much as Take Care. And over the years, things started to change with how I viewed Drake's music. Obviously, at this time as well, there's just an abundance of other rappers like Big Sean, Meek Mill, Wale, Mac Miller, Nipsey Hussle. Like, we had a lot of guys coming out of this era. And mind you, Kanye and Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, those guys, they were still dropping music at this time. Magna Carta, we had J Cole and stuff like that. So there was a lot of music in this blog era in the early 2010s that it wasn't just Drake. Then we get to 2015. And this is where the shift starts, in my opinion. He drops, if you're reading this, is too late. Now, 2015, I'm 17 years old, right? I'm in the 11th grade. At this point, high school soon done. The perspective of how I view music has changed a lot in the 2 years since he's dropped Nothing Was the Same. Outside of that, we've already had Control. We've already had other albums from the other two, right? So things in my perspective of music was changing a lot. But I really did like this album. I really did like this project when it dropped. I really was vibing with the songs on this project. Legend is one of my favorite Drake songs to this day. I still sing it. Energy, right? I got energy, got a lot of energy, right? Like, this was the switch, right? And we could tell sonically. I didn't mind it because at that time, you know, trap beats and stuff like that, you know, I was listening to a lot of Future at this point, right? Because I was 17, so Future was dropping Monster and DS2. Like, this was a time to be alive, right? But Drake definitely noticed the shift in the sound and was applying it to this mixtape or playlist or whatever he was calling it, right? And I think this is when he started the playlist concept of, I'm just making projects I'm just putting everything together. There's no cohesiveness. I'm just putting a whole bunch of songs on an album. I think this is where it started. And this is where the decline sonically, in my opinion, really started to show. Despite me liking this project, we obviously find out during the Meek Mill beef that he didn't write about, I think, maybe half of it, or maybe 5 to 6 songs on the album weren't written by him. Quentin Miller, who wrote Rico with Drake and Meek Mill as well, wrote this project, a good chunk of it. And we found out during the Meek Mill beef, which did sour a lot of the excitement I had for this album. Because of that, I can't really go back to it the same way that I did before. And there's still bangers on the album. I'll tell you, even if he didn't write some of these songs, they still sound good when he sings them, right? But I'm just looking at you sideways, I'm like, you didn't even write these songs. And then we come out to find that you don't even write your lyrics. The ghostwriting asterisk, I think, is what really did it for me at that point, where I'm like, Drake, there's nothing you can do for me going forward where I'm going to say you're better than a Kendrick or whatever, because at least to our knowledge as of now, we know Kendrick and Cole at least write their lyrics. If you have a ghostwriter, whatever the excuses, I don't care. You can't claim that you are the best writer. So I think for me, as a writer myself, I'm looking at it like, nah, B, I'm sorry, that I can't put you in the top category that I had you in, but I will still enjoy your music, right? Now, Drake will obviously go and win that beef with Meek Mill and drop back to back, which, you know, I didn't really like back to back, but everybody was singing it. It was a vibe. It was funny at the time. I'm sorry, Meek Mill. It was funny at the time to, you know, make fun of you. And that's what it was. That's what Drake did successfully there. Make it cool to make fun of Meek Mill. And that's what we were all doing. So it was kind of hard to escape the song, escape the enjoyment that everybody else was having. But I don't think it was like lyrically the most amazing diss record ever. It just was the bop, right? Now, if I'm not mistaken, 2015 is also where Drake would drop Hotline Bling. And that was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, his attempt at his first #1 song. And at that point in time, that's when, okay, it was everywhere in the news. They were playing it. It went viral. He was doing his little dance and, you know, the videos, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But that's where I think Drake realized, like, okay, screw me making music for quality at this point. Let me make music to really get these number ones in these records. We then get What a Time to Be Alive featuring Future, which, again, was a cool project. But at this point now, we've seen that he was dropping more than one project a year. Now, like I said, Future was definitely, really, really jumping at this point. He dropped Monster and the project was going crazy. DS2 would drop in 2016. But What a Time to Be Alive, the collab with Drake and Future, was, I guess, Drake's attempt at trying to really come into the Atlanta trap sound. And if he got that Future cosign, which he did, that would definitely help him a lot sonically, which it obviously did long term, as we saw. Obviously, when this album dropped at the time, 17, I loved it. And I would still go back to a couple of these songs now, right? We definitely have some bangers on this album that you can't ignore, like Digital Dash. You got Scholarships, I'm the Plug. I really love that song. Jumpman was jumping, right? 30 for 30 freestyle was good. That was good. I like Drake rapping on that, right? But I'm not going to lie to you. The appeal of this album definitely came more from hearing Future than Drake. And because Drake was going to the trap sound, it really diluted his quality of music, obviously, on the album. But at the same time, I think his mentality approaching music was definitely altered because of this project. Specifically this year, 2015, is where we really see the shift going into 2016, right? And now I just felt like at this point, he didn't really feel like he needed to put in that extreme amount of effort that we know he should be putting in. So then we go on to Views, which Views is the big project that he's been teasing, Views from the Six. And as someone from Canada and Toronto, Views from the Six, in my opinion, was a much better name. It had just much better, it felt like there was something more behind it, right? But then for whatever reason, changed the name for Views. From the moment he announced this project and showed the cover with him sitting on top, I already knew this was going to be a problem. You made it a meme, which was smart. It marketed your album. It made it meme worthy, but we're not taking you seriously. And I'm pretty sure that Drake would prefer for people not to laugh at him and take him seriously, right? So now he just plays into that because he knows people are going to laugh at him regardless. But that album cover could have been perfect without him CGI'd right on the top. That CN Tower picture, iconic, right? You just needed the tower. Views from the Six, views from the city, the tallest point in the country in Canada, you're there, right? That's all you needed to communicate. We already know you're probably in the tower, right? You don't need to put yourself on there. Now it just looks meme worthy. And that's what I felt about that whole album as a whole. This is the era where I stopped listening to Drake albums. I remember playing Views, the first few songs, and I just didn't really rock with it. Everybody around me was rocking with it, right? In Toronto and Canada, a lot of people were vibing with the album, but it didn't stick with me. And this is where I entered the era of not listening to Drake albums anymore. At this point, I would go to listen just because it's Drake. I'm going to support. I'm going to hear if there's a banger. And I'll tell you, if there's a Drake song I like, I'm going to listen to it. But at this point, it became a situation where I'm like, I'm not really feeling these songs. And there's 20 songs on the album. He was just putting 30 to 40 songs on albums at this point and just kind of overstuffing them. You know what I mean? So outside of a couple songs on this album, I don't really like it, right? It had Controller, it had One Dance. He got his number ones. It became his high stream, whatever. The metrics began to rule how he put out his music. And then we enter this era of where the music to me just doesn't become listenable anymore. It's radio friendly. So they're just pumping it constantly, which is the only reason why I'd say maybe half of us know the music, not because we willingly chose to, but because the radios play it consistently, right? So One Dance and Controller were the number one culprits of that. He also played Too Good with Rihanna and stuff like that. Like, this was the album they definitely pumped for the metrics. And I think he became one of his highest selling, right? Views and Scorpion, I think, were his highest selling. But as he was hitting those numbers, you lost me as a hardcore listener. And then now we go to 2017, More Life. Again, another project that I barely even really, I tried to play outside of a couple songs. I couldn't really tell you what I'm playing or what I played. I think I did like this interlude, 4422 with Sampha. That was pretty cool. Kiss My Teeth was okay or whatever, right? Like that, and Galchester, yeah, like whatever, you know what I mean? But More Life, this is a patois thing in Jamaican, right? Like, this is what we say in Jamaica, and it's patois, More Life, you're appropriating that. I didn't really like that, to be honest with you, either, because it's like you're not Jamaican, you know what I mean? But I get why you're using it because of the culture down here. But at the same time, it's like it doesn't seem authentic. So this is where we're really heavily seeing him go to different regions. He already did with Future, with What a Time to Be Alive, but now he's touching on the Caribbean music with Views and now More Life, but now also the UK sound. He's working with Sampha, he's working with Skepta and gigs and stuff like that. So now you're seeing a lot of him moving to other regions at this point of his career. And I couldn't tell you what I'm revisiting on this album. Like, it's a 22 song album. I don't need 22 songs from Drake, right? More Life was another one. Then we get to Scorpion, his highest, I think, selling album. Again, when I saw side A, side B, that turned me off right away. Why are we getting another 25-track Drake album? I couldn't tell you what my favorite song from this album was. At the time, I remember giving it, obviously, I was giving it some plays, right? Because I wanted to check it out and hear what he was saying, right? I really would still check out his projects. I just couldn't finish them at this point, right? Now, Nonstop, I always hated this song. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they played on the radio. I just hate I really don't like when Drake raps with the hitting on the switching on the hitting on the hitting on the. Like, I do not like that, right? So maybe I think that's Nonstop or Sicko Mode. I think that's when he started doing that. I really did not like that, right? So Nonstop, I couldn't play that song. I did like Elevate. Elevate was cool. God's Plan was cool at first. Then they started playing that everywhere. I'm Upset. I actually did like that song originally, right, before, but then it just got, played out and stuff like that. Mob Ties. This was probably my favorite song of the album. Then we found out he didn't write it. We found out allegedly that it was Vori, right? So I'm like, okay, right? Long term, looking back, no. Talk Up with Jay-Z was cool, but not their best collab, right? Ratchet Happy Birthday, I hate hearing that song. Every girl uses this song for their story whenever it's their girl's like birthday, and I hate hearing it. I hate hearing it all the time. It pisses me off. They overplay that song all the time. In My Feelings, same thing. Like, it was just very much social media, TikTok friendly music, and just there for metrics, right? And yes, the Drake fans will be in the comments, he has the highest #1 stream, this and that, blah, 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 stream this and that. I don't care. As you can hear, I was very passionate about his music in the beginning, but over time, it just became slop. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it, right? I like rapping Drake. On occasion, I like singing Drake. And it just seemed like he didn't care to rap, really, and he didn't care to sing at this point, right? And he was just putting it out for the metrics, right? So by the time we're at the Scorpion era, I'm not listening to Drake albums in full at all, right? And when we get to Certified Lover Boy now, already from when I heard the title, I said, okay, you're going to come on a Lover Man. You're going to come on this is going to be a sweet album, heartbreak possibly. You're going to be vulnerable. Then we see the album cover, and I'm like, what the hell is this? So I'll tell you with Certified Lover Boy, did not like this project either. I didn't even finish it. And to this day, I haven't finished listening to this album from start to finish. I think I got all the way to TSU or Into Deep, right? Which is like halfway. Yeah, about halfway through the album. And after that, I couldn't. Now, Champagne Poetry, this might be one of Drake's hardest intros. I don't know if he wrote it. I don't care. This might be one of Drake's hardest intros he's ever made, and I'm not afraid to say it, to be honest with you. Easily one of my probably favorite Drake songs I ever heard, and probably recently one of my favorite Drake songs he's put out. But this album was a miss for me. I like TSU and I like Into Deep, but outside of that, like, the album was a miss for me, huge miss. Then heard Honesty Nevermind. I didn't play this album. Right, I didn't play Honesty Nevermind, and Her Loss, I didn't play this either because at this point I'm already over the Drake and 21 Savage collab. I feel like they have 50 songs and it's the same thing. Travis or 21 Savage is saying I'm a big stepper. It's like it's the same thing. I do not need an album of 16 songs of the two of them, to be honest with you. Then we get For All the Dogs. Didn't play For All the Dogs. I just was not feeling this music. Look, again, another 21 Savage song. Again. And it's like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, I think the first song I played on this album was First Person Shooter just because J Cole was on it. And that was the only reason why. Slime You Out, I remember playing that and I'm like, okay, it's whatever, didn't really do anything, right? And I haven't played the rest of this. And look at it. It's a 23-song album. BBL Love. Like, I'm not playing these songs. I'm sorry. I remember hearing the 8 a.m. in Charlotte song, and everybody was like, oh, this is a timestamp. It's one of it. Like, I'm just not feeling it, yo. You know what I mean? I seen the video. Like, it's not for me at this point. You know what I mean? He drops the Scary Hours. I haven't really listened to the Scary Hours either outside of the IDGAF with Yeet and the Evil Ways, J. Cole. And look at that. With the Scary Hours included, it becomes a 29-song album. This is almost a 30-song project, right? And then now, most recently, with Some Sexy Songs for You, right? Haven't heard this album yet, and I probably never will. So that's why I personally rank Drake number 3 in my big 3 ranking, specifically because his music, in my opinion, hasn't hit the same. Now, it's sad because as you go through the beginning of his career, right, And me personally, I'm really bumping these albums. I have some of these CDs. I'm playing these albums. But then when he gets to that 2014, 15 switch over, that period, that's when the music started to change. And then after that, it's almost like half of his catalog I just can't listen to. Right now, he would drop features along over the years. Obviously, plenty of features that were hits. During 2020, the Laugh Now, Cry Later, I really did like that song with him and Lil Durk. Right here and there, Drake would definitely have singles that I liked. Right, and I find that over the years, as he dropped projects, there were albums that I didn't like, but they had a couple songs that I did. And I felt like that's kind of how I viewed him going forward. He would just have a couple songs that I would like throughout the years, but not an album. And I need you to have a good album. Like, if I can't play your album from start to finish on a random day a year after it dropped, we got a problem. You know what I mean? So that's why Drake, for me personally, was always number 3, because that's how I viewed his music over time. Now, let's get to my number 2 of my big 3 ranking, and that number 2 will go to J. Cole. Now, Kendrick and J. Cole, my 2 favorites of this era, right? It's no secret, obviously, now Kendrick is number 1 on my big 3 list, and if you've been subscribed to my channel, you would know and guess that, but J. Cole was always right there for me personally. Now, I started listening to J. Cole around 2010, 2011, if I'm not mistaken. That's the first time I started listening to J. Cole, right? Now, some of these mixtapes I haven't heard yet at this point, right? I listened to more of his older music later on, so I kind of went backwards. So I think the first album I heard was Friday Night Lights from J. Cole, right? Friday Night Lights was a very good project overall. It was a good introduction, and I was very much loving it. I had Villamatic on replay. I was playing Friday Night Lights, of course, right? And it was a good introduction into J. Cole, right? I was like, who is this guy? He signed to Jay-Z, and that's kind of how I first was really hearing about J. Cole, was because he was signed to Jay-Z. So I'm obviously listening to Jay-Z at this time. I hear about this guy named Jermaine Cole. I'm like, okay, let me hear him out. And he's rapping good. So I'm hearing Friday Night Lights, and then the second project I hear is Cold World, The Sideline Story, right? Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the album that has Mr. Nice Watch, with Jay-Z, and Nobody's Perfect with Missy Elliott. That was when I first was like, oh, okay, J. Cole, he's talking about Barbados, I'm part Bayesian, okay, this is cool, you know what I mean? Like, this is lit. And as a person who was listening to, obviously, you know, Jay-Z's and stuff like that, and definitely earlier on in my life, I was listening to a lot of Tupac, you know, hearing more lyricism being emphasized from another guy that Jay-Z signed and one of the top guys of the blogger. It was very nice to hear, right? Like, Cole was definitely showing his potential, and it was a sound that I like to listen to. Workout is obviously his big hit, you know what I mean? But then we get to Born Sinner. 2013, he drops the album the same day as Kanye. This is when I knew Cole wasn't playing around. Probably one of my favorite projects from J. Cole. From Villuminati right away, I'm like, oh, this album is going to be crazy, right? Land of the Snakes, nice little fun song. Power Trip with Miguel, come on. I still play that song to this day, right? We have She Knows. That's another banger song right there. That's a classic. You could play that whenever. Rich Niggas, right? Forbidden Fruit, Kendrick Lamar. I'm mad that Kendrick didn't get a verse on it, but I don't care. That's all we had at the time. In the 9th grade, I was spinning this album on repeat. And like I said, I was a big Kanye fan too, right? So I was playing Yeezus and Born Sinner back to back. But we were spoiled in 2013. We were so spoiled we didn't even know. Like, getting those albums the same day, amazing. And J. Cole really showed that he's willing to compete by dropping on the same day as Kanye, but at the same time showing that, yo, I'm out here, you know what I mean? I got, you know, the bars and the songs to really last and make an impact. And I feel like with Born Sinner, at least for me personally, he definitely made that impact. And at this point, I was a hardcore listener to Cole. I'm bumping whatever you drop, whatever it is, I'm a spin. And then a year later, he would obviously drop Forest Hills Drive, which platinum, no features. We don't need to even discuss it. Every one of these songs on this album, I think I went triple platinum in my house. I played it nonstop. Like, it was ridiculous. When he dropped this album, I think it was late 2014. So I was in the 11th grade at the time. But I just remember, I have a fun memory with this album because I was in a drama class at this point and we had a presentation. I had to come up with a presentation, and we ended up using this album, some of the songs in the presentation, and made like a whole dance. It was so cool. It was so funny too, looking back at it now. But like, it's amazing how music can bring you back to a specific moment in time and a good memory, whatever it may be. And you can almost relive that memory through the song because it invokes that emotions that you had at the time, right? So that Forest Hills Drive, some people would say it's not relatable, for the most part. But I'm 17 at this point. This was probably the most relatable album he dropped, right? And the most relatable album that I could listen to at the time, right? So, J. Cole wasn't some super rich guy. Obviously, he wasn't talking about, gangbang and stuff like that. So this is stuff that I could relate to a lot more, obviously, compared to the other two at times, right? Despite me liking their music, right? So J. Cole would drop Forest Hills Drive, probably my favorite album by him just because of how it resonates with the time. But Wicked Project, right? Wicked Project all around. He would drop that. And then For Your Eyes Only, a much smaller project in 2016, but I still loved it, right? Deja Vu is a banger. I still sing that song. If there's a girl out there, fellas, that doubts you, play Deja Vu. It will remind you that you still got it, right? But I mean, come on, like this album was small, but it was sweet and short in my opinion, right? And I think this is his highest selling project, right? I know people like to say it's a diet to Pimp a Butterfly, which, we could definitely talk about that, right? But I think it being his highest selling project and only being 10 songs, it kind of, shows you, right? And he went on a tour for this album, if I'm not mistaken, where it was just him. It was just him like in a jumpsuit, prison jumpsuit, just him performing. That's a lot of aura you have to do that because as you can see, I mean, nowadays the standard for rappers to perform their songs is horrible. They can barely even perform their tracks, right? But J. Cole was able to do that just himself. No bands, no pyrotechnics, just him, right? So you got to give him credit. And this album, I know, had Neighbors and stuff like that. I love this project. Very good project. And I still revisit it from time to time, right? So then we go to 2018, 2 years later, KOD. Right, this was J. Cole's essential attack and rebuttal to the rise of mumble rappers and mumble rap and the mediocrity in rap, period. Right, because J. Cole was becoming a target for a lot of that. Lil Pump and other rappers that were younger were saying F J. Cole and they were attacking him because he was kind of like the corny lyrical guy to make fun of. They weren't really saying that about Kendrick, which I was shocked, but they were coming for Cole a lot. I remember hearing that a lot. Smoke Perp and all those guys, they were like, oh, F J. Cole in his music. So J. Cole was like, all right. And he kind of took it upon himself to come back and make fun of mumble rap, but also speak down to them, but at the same time, give them some wisdom, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to diss you. He did diss them, but at the same time, he did give them some knowledge about, where your life is going to head if you don't take it serious. And some of them obviously didn't take that advice seriously enough, right? And here they are now in a different position, but J. Cole sonically, I think this was a tough album. At this point in time, I think I was 20 years old, right? So KOD was definitely something I was still bumping. It had a lot of the trap sounds. He was playing into those drums and stuff like that, but wasn't his most cohesive album, right? Still a good album, right? But in terms of J. Cole standards, it's not a Forest Hills Drive or a For Your Eyes Only, or even a Born Sinner, right? I think KOD is just an album for the time, so that might be a little dated for some people, but at the same time, I still think there's some wicked sounding songs on this album, and I was definitely vibing with it. Then we go to the off season, which I think was definitely a step up from Forest Hills Drive, but the off season was the one for me where it was another album that at the time it just kind of hit. This was 2021, so this was like COVID time, and I actually had gotten sick with the corona at this time. I didn't really have anything to do at this point. Like when the album came out, I had it, right? And I had nothing to do but listen to this album, really. So it just kind of brought me back to that time. As crazy as it was, it was a time for reflection, obviously in isolation and stuff like that. But I think the album kind of invoked what was going on at the time too. And J. Cole, ironically, was actually playing basketball for our one of our teams in Toronto at this point, I think via Drake. I think Drake kind of hooked that up. The Scarborough Shooting Stars. It's a basketball team that J. Cole was essentially playing for. And it kind of followed the theme of him playing basketball in Africa and then coming to Toronto and, him wanting to accomplish his dreams of being a basketball player and stuff like that, and him designing his shoe. So it was a very cool era for J. Cole to kind of get introspective and let us know how he felt and kind of a reflection of where he was at the time. I still think it's a better project than KOD, but in a weird way, I think KOD maybe is a little bit more memorable just because this came out during COVID. So I could see why people would, look back and be like, oh, I don't really remember that album even happening because it was prime COVID, right? Then we get to famously Might Delete Later, where I actually really love this album outside of 7 Minute Drill. And obviously he deleted 7 Minute Drill, so it's not on the album, and he deleted it, but not just because, I feel bad, right? But I think he himself knew that you actually had a very solid 11-track album here, right? And you clearly record that song in 7 minutes, like he said, and he did it last minute. But it ruined the album, And that's why he had to delete it, because you almost had a near perfect rollout here with this project, right? I think Crocodile Tears, Hunting Wabbits, HYB, Sticks and Stones, Pie, Stealth Mode, 3001. I'm going back to all these songs to this day. And it pisses me off with this album because, and how he carried himself with the beef, because he had a wicked sounding project right here, and that's all he really needed. And if he had a super sick diss, then he could have really cemented himself and things could have went differently. But obviously, that's not how it happened. But Might Delete Later, outside of the misstep, I think is a wicked sounding J. Cole project, right? And altogether now, obviously we're waiting for the fall off, and I really do hope the fall off is really good. But if you were to compare my reviews of J. Cole's albums and how I listened to them over the years versus someone like Drake, you can see where I just related to what J. Cole was saying and how he made his music and his overall message overall more than what Drake did. Now, J. Cole would drop his collab albums. You'd have Revenge of the Dreamers and stuff like that. I really did like Revenge of the Dreamers 3. This is what really kind of put me on to Dreamville. Under the Sun was obviously crazy, Down Bad, right? Earth Gang and JID, Ari Lennox and stuff like that. Like this was a good introduction to his album, and I was really spinning that project overall at that time. And J. Cole would definitely go on his feature run in the late 2010s going into the 2020s. Wicked feature run overall. I don't know what my favorite song would be from that feature run. I do like the Johnny P's Caddy. I know that London song with Bia, his verse was wicked. I think I called it the London with Bia, but the London song he had with Travis Scott and Young Thug, I really did like that song. If we can consider that within the feature run, like period, then that definitely was one of my favorites. But you can't dispute that he went on a feature run to prove, right, that he can hop on all these sounds and all these beats and make it effortless. And he did. Right, so I think J. Cole has definitely sat back and thought about how to approach this new era of making music. And now that he's in his final stages, I hope that he can apply what he's done with his earlier projects that I really liked to the Fall Off, right? And if you haven't already checked out my video, The Fall Off dropped and you didn't know it, I'll leave the link in the description. But now let's finally get to the number one, Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar was the guy. Kendrick Lamar was the one. From when I started listening to him already, I knew what it was. And the first Kendrick Lamar song I heard, I think was 2010, if I'm not mistaken, or early 2011, I heard Michael Jordan, right? And I'm like, okay, I like this. And then from 2011, around that era, around that time, 2011, the first official song I remember really listening to by Kendrick Lamar was ADHD. ADHD was going crazy in my MP3 at the time. I love that song. And from ADHD, I listened to Rigor Mortis, right? And from Rigor Mortis, that's when I went back to Section 80, because I'm like, what the hell is this Section 80 album, right? And from Section 80, I knew what it was. We go back to Section 80 from the beginning, F Your Ethnicity, right? Banger song, right? Hold Up, ADHD, obviously, No Makeup. I know people don't like No Makeup. I love this song. I don't know. I maybe it's the message of the song that I really like, but I think this is a really good song, right? We have Tammy's song, right? Her Evils, Ronald Reagan era. If there's a song that reminds me of this era itself, it's this one right here. I don't know why. It's just, it brings me back to 2011, and I was only 13 at the time, like I said, but I still vividly remember this era, and the music brings me back. Keisha's song, probably one of my favorites off the album, right? It's literally his Brenda's Got a Baby. I love it. Rigor Mortis, banger. Kush and Corinthians, banger. Blow My High, Aaliyah tribute, banger. Absol's outro, come on. Absol went crazy, banger. High Power, come on. You like this is what I'm talking about. And ironically, J. Cole produced that song. But High Power, one of Kendrick's greatest tracks, probably one of his most important songs. And this is on his first studio album. So from already, we knew something crazy was coming with this guy. And mind you, by this same year, we heard him on Take Care with Buried Alive. And at that point, after hearing Section 80 and hearing him on Drake's album, I'm like, oh, all right, Kendrick got it. All you got to do is drop another album and he's probably going to take my number one spot. Well, then he goes on to do exactly that by dropping easily his greatest album of all time, Good Kid, Mad City. Now, Good Kid, Mad City. Where were you when Good Kid, Mad City dropped? I'll tell you right now, I was just starting high school, and if there was an album that was perfect for somebody starting high school, it was this one right here. Man, when I tell you Good Kid, Mad City from start to finish, triple, quadruple, platinum, ultra, whatever you want to call it, in my headphones. I don't know what it was, but this was the beginning of Kendrick dropping projects that oddly resonated with me with where I was at my life at that specific point in time. It's like every project he drops, there's a section or the theme of the whole raw album or songs or whatever it may be that super resonate with what I'm going through at that time. I don't know how he does it, but it's what he's talking about with how he lays out his narrative, the perspective of trauma, the perspective of being a good kid in a mad city and seeing this madness grow around him and how he was able to layer that. It's a lot of crazy things to say in an album. And you could write all these things down that he's saying and putting on this album. And you could probably look at it and say, how do you make this sonically pleasing? And he somehow figured it out. Right? Like it took me a couple years, because I'm only in the 9th grade, but it took me a couple years to realize that Swimming Pools was about him being peer pressured to drink, right? And obviously in high school, that's something a lot of people, can relate to, peer pressure in general, right? So off rip, the fact that one of your biggest songs was about stopping and the negatives of peer pressure and stopping alcoholism and stuff like that, but then we're drinking to the song, you know what I mean? Like it was just so crazy to see that, right? But Good Kid, Mad City, Shireen, banger. Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, banger. Backseat Freestyle, banger. The Art of Peer Pressure, one of my favorite Kendrick songs ever. I wish I could have made a music video to this song because every time I hear this song, I picture what I would shoot it for a video in my head. Money Trees, one of my favorite songs. Look at that, 1 billion plays already. Poetic Justice, come on. I mean, hey, it's Drake. It's Drake. But you can say what you want. It's still a wicked song. You know what I'm saying? Then we got Mad City, right? Classic MC8. I love that song. Mad Swimming Pools, of course. This is the extended version, right? I still love that version too. Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, one of Kendrick's saddest songs he's ever done. And there's a ton of those, right? Real, underrated track. Compton, underrated track. Then the remix, which I wish he performed the original more on tour, but I don't mind him performing the remix because he had a harder verse on that one. He did not let Jay-Z rest at all. Outside of obviously his album in 2012, he would then go and drop Control, which started the great rap war that we're in now and a previous earlier rap civil war back at that time. And he would call out every single rapper who was up at that time for smoke. I ain't never seen a run like this. He just dropped probably the greatest album I ever heard at that point because I'm only 14. Then he goes and when I'm 15 years old, drops Control. And that one I was like, okay, this guy, he's just a different guy. Like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? I ain't never seen this. This was my first real rap beef that I could consciously, right? Or rap feud that I could consciously enjoy, right? There were other ones that I heard about later on in life, or I was there and I just was too young to really process what was going on. But this was the first time we were seeing a rapper keep it at that competitive level in the modern time for me to consciously appreciate. And that was a crazy moment in hip hop and I'll never forget it. But then he goes 2015, drops To Pimp a Butterfly, which becomes my favorite hip hop album of all time. From start to finish, I'll play this album and I still do almost every other day. And why this album obviously resonates with me, and I feel like a lot of other people, is, he's talking about the motherland. He's talking about slavery. He's talking about oppression, all right, the struggles that Black people face, wanting to go back home, right, and appreciating his heritage, his culture, standing up for something and standing up for injustices, all right, and going against the system, and calling out how the system oppresses Black people, people of color, and other people just who are marginalized in general. And it was just such a perfect album for the time because people were definitely at a boiling point, and they still are now, but at that point in time, right, it was just something so refreshing to hear. As even as a Black Canadian, it was so nice to hear someone who is at the top of hip hop not talk about guns and drugs and girls and all this stuff and actually use an album like this to talk about what was needed to hear in the community. And you can't dispute that. You can call it all these ignorant terms that we see people call it every now and then. It just kind of reveals something about you. Right. And that's why I like to say, like, you can have an opinion on not liking Kendrick's voice or, his music. But when people start saying they don't like what he discusses, I look at you cross. You can have an opinion on what you like and what you don't like. But I can also have my opinion on who you are based on you saying specific things like that. Like you saying you don't like the subject matter of a Kendrick Lamar or sometimes maybe even a J Cole when he touches on subjects or topics like this. I look at you weird as a human because there's literally nothing you could say from these artists talking about these issues. There's nothing negative you could take away from that just because they're speaking on it. The only negative thing you could say is something that is an issue for you and it isn't an issue for everyone else. You can't say, oh, you're just going to bore people to death by talking about history and Black oppression. There's nothing wrong with talking about that. But there is most definitely something wrong with talking about drugs and killing and stuff like that. Those same people who stand for only that will be like, we don't want to hear boring music. there's literally nothing that you could take away from listening to music like this, unless you're not interested. But you can't say anything negative about it, right? And that's why I hold this album as probably my favorite hip hop album, tied with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, because it opened my mind. It made me start questioning things. It made me start appreciating and understanding the culture more. I'm seeing all these injustices. I'm seeing our people being slighted and taken advantage of and done dirty. And it's like, yo, what can I do to help, right? At best, it just gives you that mentality to think that you could accomplish something and do something for yourself. And that's what I think is so important for this project, right? Whether you're little Joe Schmo or you're the biggest billionaire or whatever, at this point in time, there is something that you can do. And hearing this album, it was refreshing to hear that was possible. I love this album. I would probably say my favorite song on this album might be These Walls, might be Tied with Mama, or I would say it could be Wesley's Theory, because that intro, I mean, come on, man. Like, you're never going to beat that intro. That was one of the greatest things I ever heard, right? And it's just like you didn't expect it, right? You had George Clinton and Thundercat on there. Like, come on, bro. Like, let's put some respect on this album, right? And I remember people were dissing this project when it first came out. It was like a Mr. Morale. They were dissing it. But as it aged, you couldn't dispute how great it sonically sounded. And all his albums, I think, in my opinion, age amazingly. Now, we do go on to Damn in 2017. That's obviously his most commercial album, right? And Damn was another breath of fresh air. He was talking about God and spirituality. And at this point, I think I was about 19 years old, right? So I was fresh out of high school, right? I was working. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my career with film and stuff like that. And I was opening my mind to a lot of things. I was really not questioning my faith, but really just trying to build a foundation on it and try to figure out, what I really believe in. Obviously believing in God, right? But it another album that for me personally just came at the perfect time. And just he's talking about damnation and stuff like that, right? He's talking about black people. He's talking about the Bible and Israelites and stuff like that. There was just so many different perspectives and messages that he put into this album that you just had to appreciate, right? And, I would probably say one of my favorite songs on this album, definitely going to be God. I know a lot of people don't like that song. I think that's a wicked song. But God, DNA, and Element, come on, man. When I first heard that song, when I first saw the visuals, this is the album, by the way, I think where Kendrick really went ham on the visuals, and it's like shifted ever since then. But like it's the imagery and the attention to detail that you really do appreciate. And it's only 14 songs, right? Only 14 track album, but wicked album nonetheless. Definitely one of his most commercials, and it makes sense. And I'm glad that he actually had an album like this in his catalog, because people were starting to doubt him and say, oh, To Be a Butterfly, oh, this and that. We don't want to hear that. So, all right, let him come back with a commercial album. And you guys gonna be crying, oh, they're playing him too much. It's always one or the other with these fools, right? But wicked project nonetheless. Lust. That's another one right here. When I first heard that beat, I love when rappers use like reverse beats, like when they add the reverse and they make it a beat still somehow. I love that. And Lust was just one of the best examples of that. So Damn, definitely one of my favorite projects by Kendrick. And it was something special, very something special. There are obviously some other albums, like, we had the Black Panther album in the 2018. And I do consider that one of his projects, but he obviously more so wrote on it than actually being on the album, and just got a whole bunch of other artists on it. But come on, this album was also crazy. The soundtrack for this movie, insane, right? All the Stars, of course, we all know All the Stars, right? The song X was cool. I really like that song. Ops was all right with Vince Staples. I played it a couple of times. Paramedic was crazy. And if you didn't know, this was the original Element beat, right? So he actually was dissing man's on Element on that song before he gave it to SOB RBE, right? And I still love what they did on that song. Definitely one of my favorites from the album. Bloody Waters by Ab-Soul and James Blake. Ooh, crazy album, right? Crazy song right here, right? King's Dead, of course, one of the most memorable songs from the album, right? The Redemption song was cool. And Big Shot with Travis Scott, wicked track. And then obviously Pray For Me with The Weeknd, another wicked song. So he was still putting out commercial hits. But I don't think people understood, like, between putting out Damn, writing for J-Rock's album, allegedly, I think he wrote for Redemption, writing for the Black Panther album. This is a lot of music he put out, right? And having writer's block going into 2019, 2020, it kind of made sense, right? So Kendrick would disappear for 4 years, right? Pretty much 4 years. But then he would return outside of putting out a wicked, feature and Family Ties with Baby Keem, right? And obviously featuring on his album, his debut album. He would then drop the year after that, in 2022, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which to me is still one of his greatest albums. I know people say it's not sonically pleasing, blah, blah, blah. But as you can see, people are starting to turn around on the album. And like I said, when this album first came out, I had said that I'm like, yeah, people may not like it as much because it's not a commercial sounding album as Damn. But as time goes on, just like To Pimp a Butterfly, people are going to resonate, go back and say they actually like it more. Because I don't think people remember, To Pimp a Butterfly had like almost near the same reception as Mr. Morale at first. People weren't really vibing with it. They wanted bangers. They wanted a radio-friendly song or whatever. There wasn't really much of that on the album. But over time, people had returned to the album and began to actually understand and praise it a little bit more. And it's much deserved, in my opinion, right? Now we're just seeing 3 years later, United in Grief, the first song of the album, is just now going viral. It's a wicked song. From when I heard when I heard those beats and those drums, I'm like, okay, we're getting something crazy on this. But we got United in Grief, wicked song, wicked beginning to his project. And I love how he starts his albums. N95. He always goes with a wicked intro and then a banger as always the second song. N95 is crazy. Worldwide Steppers interlude with Kodak. We got Kendrick on there rapping some spoken word type music type stuff. Crazy. I love that track. Even though it's a little interlude, kind of not really a full song, I still love it, right? Die Hard, definitely a banger. Should have been a banger. Don't know why it wasn't a banger, right? But I love that track. Father Time, probably my top 10, one of my top 10 favorite Kendrick tracks, right? We have the Rich interlude with Baby Keem. Rich Spirit, obviously, wicked song. Drake didn't listen to the song clearly because he warned him. We Cry Together, that's obviously an argument on wax. We have Purple Hearts with Summer Walker and Ghostface Killah. Underrated song in my opinion. Count Me Out, another top 10 Kendrick song. Silent Hill with Kodak Black, I love that track as well. Both the Saviors are wicked. Anti-Diaries is a very important song. Or Mr. Morale, I think Pharrell produced on this track, if I'm not mistaken. Mother I Sober, another one of Kendrick's saddest songs. Like I said, he has many. And then Mirror and Heart Part 5. Perfect way to end the album overall. Mirror was crazy. It was like a Michael Jackson type song in a sense with him singing and harmonizing. But then Heart Part 5 is obviously the single he released first before the album. And he was just spitting crazy on that track. 5 different perspectives, the 5 hearts. Underrated era. And now that we're in the GNX era, I think people are appreciating Mr. Morale a lot more. And I feel like that's Kendrick's career. Every time he drops a new project, you go back to the previous one and you really appreciate that previous project more, especially if you were someone that didn't really like it. I find that a lot of people that go back and revisit his music later on actually understand and resonate with it more, because you got to go through stuff. You got to go through life to really, listen to certain types of music and kind of resonate with it. If you don't, you won't, and that's fine, right? But if you are going through things, some of these songs and some of these projects will help you get through them, and you will actually just feel a little bit more at ease knowing that there's someone else who you may hold to a high regard that's going through something similar as you. And I think that's why people appreciate Mr. Morale and To Pimp a Butterfly more in his catalog, as opposed to his other projects that are kind of more universally appreciated, like Damn and Good Kid, Mad City. And then we get to his new, I guess you could say, universally appreciated project, GNX, which he's currently on tour for now. I went to the Toronto concerts, the 2 of them. If you guys didn't already know, you could check that out. I'll leave the link in the description. I think I've talked about this album enough on this channel, but 12 for 12, 12 for 12. Months removed now, it's still charting, it's still doing what it needs to do, and it's a 12 for 12 album. Luther is still there. With these 12 songs alone, he made such a difference with his career. I'm so very proud of him personally for making a 12-track album, 44 minutes, and have so much variety on it and vibes for everybody. It's just a testament to where he's at in his career. And this is why I personally rank him number 1. Not only was he able to feed into the personal things that I was going through at the times of my life, because like I said, each album he dropped kind of weirdly resonated with me, but at the same time, I was able to gain something from the music that he was making. And I'm that type of person. It may not be for everybody. People sometimes just want to listen to music just because and they don't care to learn. But I do, right? And I am very much appreciative of people who can make learning in music and give us something while making it sound good. That's not an easy thing to do, and only certain people can do that. I think J Cole is very good at it, and I think Kendrick is probably one of the best guys that can handle the balance, right? I know people will be like, oh, there's way better lyricists, Lupe and all this and that. Yes, but at the same time, you have to be able to be a wicked lyricist and make your music sound good, and not all these amazing lyricists can do that, as amazing as they may be. That's why I had Kendrick number 1 out of my big 3, and just over the years, you could probably kind of hear it how I described listening to these albums, just how my personal taste kind of grew over the years for them. And like I said, Kendrick and Cole were very close in my big three, where Drake was always number 3, right? But there was a point in time, like I said earlier in Drake's career, where I was really rocking with him. And the only reason why I probably didn't have him at number 1 in my big 3 at that point was because I was still carrying and listening to, you know, Kanye's and the Jay-Z's and the Lil Wayne's at that time. And I had them as my big 3 at that point. So that is my big 3 order. I know I left out a couple songs, or I know I left out a couple projects for these guys, like Overly Dedicated for Kendrick. I know I left out a couple for J. Cole. And I know I left out a bunch of songs for Drake, but I'm not going to go through the entire career. But I felt like this video, as long as it may be, because I'm now seeing how long it is, I felt like this video was imperative for me to do by me looking back at each of their projects and the eras, because it's just going to kind of bring me back to where I was at that point in time. And that's what I wanted. So that is my big 3 ranking in order. I have Kendrick number 1. I got Cole number 2. I got Drake number 3. Say what you want about these guys, but, you know, project for project, they are the best, right? No matter what, they are the top 3 of their genre and have been for a long time. And who knows how long they will be, because it seems like they are the ones that still have to carry it, right? And until we get new stars, that's what it looks like it's going to have to be. So you guys let me know. I spent a long time on this, so if you guys stuck with me to the end, I truly do appreciate you. But what is your order of the big 3 and why? Tell me some of your favorite Drake, Kendrick, and Cole songs or albums. Tell me who you have above who, and sound off in the comments. I'm very curious to hear your perspectives on where you rank the big 3 and, you know, how you appreciate their music and what music you like from them and what you don't. So I'm looking forward to hearing that from you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. I'm going to have more content coming soon. I do appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me. The goal is to hit 5,000 subscribers by the end of summer. So if you can subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Don't forget to stay blessed and stay tuned.
Tell me, I don't want to talk on no selling. You know I got language barriers. There's no accent you can sell me. You're cold and ivory, you know I'm a selfish. The crown is heavy. I pray they ain't my real friends. If not.